Hey, it is Kenny from Kenny's Audiophile Record Reviews. Thank you very much for viewing my channel. Please like and subscribe. I really appreciate that. Also, in the comments or the description section below, there's many of my links to my older videos. Please check those videos out. That'll help me out and help out my channel. But in this video, I'm going to give a review and a discussion of the Anita Baker album called Rapture. This album was issued in 1986. When this album was released, I was 25, 26 years old, at least depending on the exact date of this release. So I was right in that demographic of the type of person who would buy such a record, such a fabulous singer, Anita Baker. She was and still is a fabulous singer. I think as of the recording of this video, which is September 2023, I believe she's touring as of this moment. So I wish her well on her tour. But Anita Baker, to me, was she was almost like a 1980s version of the great 1960s, 1970s singer Nancy Wilson. I think if Anita Baker was around in the 60s, she could have been a version of Nancy Wilson. If Nancy Wilson was around, you know, at her peak in the 80s, or if she just started out in the 80s, she could have done what Anita Baker did in the 80s very well. I'm not saying that one's better than the other, but they're both marvelous singers. But that being said, Anita Baker was a fabulous alternative to some of the bands and acts that were going on in the 60s, like, you know, Prince, Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson. I saw her one time in the 80s in LA. She was a great alternative to singers like Cyndi Lauper. I saw her in person in the 80s as well. You know, she was a great alternative to Whitney Houston. A marvelous singer, by the way. Saw her in person as well. And also, you know, bands like, you know, acts like Tears for Fears, you know, Duran Duran, and so on and so forth. She was a great alternative to a lot of those bands and a lot of those acts at the time. Anita Baker, I consider her like an R&B, smooth jazz type of singer. A marvelous talent in terms of vocal talent. You know, her overall talent base. On this album, she was also executive producer as well. So she had a lot of say-so, I assume, what went on in this album, how it was put together. So I'm gonna give a review of this album, give at the end of this video, a score of the performance on this album, and also the sound of the album. I have an issue with one of them, and I get to that during this video. And again, this album was released on Elektra Records in 1986. And just to give you a background in terms of what I was listening on, I listened on two turntables. I wanted to try it out on two turntables. One turntable was a Riga P8 turntable with a Feta 3 cartridge. And I have another turntable. It's a Technics SP15 turntable with a Audio-Technica VM540ML cartridge. I just wanted to give it a listen on both of those cartridges just to see if it gave a different groove and vibe in terms of what I was listening to. My phono stage is a West, that's a WHEST 0.20 phono stage. So that's my analog setup that I will listen to this record on. And I must say, a lot of the songs, especially on side one, I mean, you have 5 songs, 1, 2, 3, actually 4 songs on side one consecutively that are just excellent songs. Sweet Love, You Bring Me Joy, Caught Up in the Rapture, and Been So Long are just amazing songs. I love the way the album is mixed in terms of the musicians and the vocalist and Anita Baker, it's mixed very well in terms of the spread and just the overall mix of the musicians on this album. This album was mastered. The engineer on this album was Barney Perkins, and the mastering was done by Bernie Grundman. Bernie Grundman, the legendary mastering engineer. But like I said, the 5 songs on side 1, in terms of the lyrics, the vocal delivery, are just amazing. And also, Anita Baker doubles as a backup vocalist, as part of the backup vocalist team on this record too. So she was really busy in terms of her involvement in this production. I know the song Sweet Love. I love how she is, the first few seconds of the song, just the echo and delay in her voice that expands a little bit to the right speaker, because on my sound system I have tall speakers, and on my setup, and since I have tall speakers, she's maybe a little bit to the right of the center of the sound stage, but very tall since I have tall speakers. And in the first few seconds of Sweet Love, her that very initial singing, her voice, how the echo and delay goes to the right speaker, sounds fabulous. And the overall mix of that sound is really great. Just the mix, the way it's mixed together. And her singing on You Bring Me Joy, she just hits all the ranges, all the vocal ranges. She hits all those notes superbly. And she just does a stand-up and an outstanding job of her singing on You Bring Me Joy. And the saxophone solo on You Bring Me Joy is actually pretty good as well. But like I said, I love all the songs on side 1. I'm not as big as on the song You Bring Me Joy as most of the audience probably is. I know that's a very popular song. I like the song, but I like Sweet Love, Caught Up in the Rapture, Been So Long, and Mystery. Mystery's on side 2 better than You Bring Me Joy, but You Bring Me Joy is a great song. But like I said, her singing and her delivery, her passion, her approach is nothing short of superb. If I were to rate Anita Baker as a vocalist alone on this record, I would give her a solid A. She gets a solid A in terms of her effort and her performance. If I didn't mention this, by the way, the legendary Brazilian percussionist Paulinho da Costa is on this record as well on a few of the tracks. But like I said, her performance is exemplary. It's just outstanding. And again, the album was mixed very well in terms of the mix of their the instruments. The arranging was great. I like the depth and dimension of her singing on this album. How her voice sits and echoes and decays in the sound space and the instruments as well. I have to say this, in that the way music sounds on a high fidelity system, a good high fidelity system, and I think I have one, by the way, and I'll leave the link to my system tour for those who hadn't seen it in the description below. The way music sounds on a good high fidelity system is a little bit better or different than the way it sounds listening on a cell phone or a cell phone through earbuds or a laptop or computer with headphones on. It's a different experience. To me, I think you get more of a feel of the soundstage and the depth and dimension of the soundstage listening to it on a good high-end system. That's what I listen to this on. And the issue I have with this record is not the performance by Anita Baker or the performances by the musician. I think they're great. I think first of all, this album sounds like it was recorded digitally. It sounds like an early digital recording. I don't know if that is true, or maybe some of the viewers can leave a comment in the comment section below if this was recorded digitally or through an analog recording chain. Because to me, a lot of the the instruments do not sound detailed. They don't sound like, for example, the trumpet playing. And there's a great not trumpet playing, the saxophone playing on "You Bring Me Joy." There's a good solo, but the solo doesn't sound detailed. It sounds flat to me. It doesn't sound like a real trumpet. The drums are very bright, on the treble side, and it doesn't sound like a detailed and great drum set. When I'm listening to other recordings, like, for example, the Steamin' with Miles Davis album, and there's a drum solo. I think the name of the song is Salt Peanuts. I could be wrong. There's an amazing drum solo by Philly Joe Jones that sounds fantastic. And on this analog recording, it sounds like Joe Jones's drum set is literally in a room. It gives you that much detail. It really does. Where on this Rapture album, the drums seem very thin, very flat, and they don't have detail. And the same for this one, this Dave Brubeck recording, where the drum solo of Joe Morello is very detailed. It's very dimensional. It's very analog. It's very real. It's very warm. And you get the sense, on a good stereo setup, that drum kit is in the room. That's how detailed those recordings sound. Whereas this particular one, like I said, the performances were great. The mixing was great. But the recording seems a little bit on the lackluster side in terms of the saxophone sounding like a real saxophone, the drums sounding like a real drum kit, and the keyboard sounding like a real keyboard. The keyboards playing or sound seemed thin, and so did the sound of the saxophone and the drums. Like I said, I have no problem with the performance, the performers. It's just the sound. It doesn't come across that well on this pressing that I have of the album, by the way. I don't know what it sounds like on CD. It could sound phenomenal on CD. But like I said, those instruments, when I listen to it very carefully on my system, the drums don't sound like real drums. They seem thin. The saxophone playing does not sound like a saxophone playing with great detail and warmth and the realism of a real saxophone. And like I said, the keyboard playing sounds thin to me. So I think there's an potential issue with the recording, not the mixing, not the performance by Anita Baker, but the recording. It wasn't, to me, it didn't sound like it was recorded very well to me. And like I said, it could come across differently when you listen to earbuds through a cell phone or listen to it on a computer with headphones. But when we listen to it on a high fidelity system, some of the nuances and flaws can really be heard more so, I think, on a high fidelity system. And that's my take on this album. But I think I would give the performance of Anita Baker and the musicians and backup singers, because the backup singers did a great job. I give the performance of Anita Baker and crew a 9. The sound, however, be honest with you, I give it a 7. I've heard a lot better. I think if this was recorded well, this would have been one of the better albums of all time, because the songs on here are fabulous. But it doesn't come across as an audiophile recording. And it doesn't have to, by the way, all the time, because a lot of people are not audiophiles and they're just into the music, and there's nothing wrong with that, just being into the music and ignoring all that audiophile stuff, because if you do that, that's a fabulous album. I mean, it's a fabulous album anyway, but it doesn't stand up to some of the more greater albums in terms of sound quality. Like I said, it was performed well, mixed well. It just doesn't sound, you know, as good as some of the better recordings that I've heard. So on performance, I give a 9. On sound, I'm being generous and I'll give it a 7. But please leave your comments in the comment section below. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe to my channel. I appreciate that as well. Thank you for viewing my video. God bless, strong love, and peace to all worldwide.